Welcome once again, episode 10 of the Sesh, powered by Cornfed Coaching FC. Transition from attacking to defending, defending to attacking. We spend most of the game in these phases, and with all that goes to being successful in these moments, running a quality training session is important as it is challenging. Here to help us out on this second Friday of 2021, as we think about how we can better coach the transition phase, is the technical director for the coaching manual, Paul Bright. Paul also serves as the national technical director for AYSO United. Paul, it's great to have you with us today. How are things going?
Yeah, Damien, thanks for having me on the show. Looking forward to discussing everything with you and Vince and Susan. Everything's going good.
Yeah, no, it should be a really good time. What are some things you got going on? I've been getting some emails from the coaching manual. It seems like you guys are developing some new partnerships and doing some fresh content and some stuff there.
Yeah, there's lots going on with the coaching manual, obviously, during current activities and a lot of people not being able to get on the field or not being able to do in-person coach education. We've continued to provide digital coach education through our partnerships with the League Managers Association. And we've just, in the last 7 days, signed a partnership with the Professional Footballers Association in England, the PFA. So that's the Players Union in England. And they obviously provide coach education for players who are transitioning into management. So we're going to work very closely with their coach education team in providing a digital platform there, alongside our partnerships across the globe, really, with Southampton Football Club, Glasgow Rangers, Chicago Fire here in the US, Surf Soccer Club, AYSO United, and Rush Soccer Club. So we're keeping very busy and just trying to continue to do what our mission has always been, which is to support the game, to support coaches, players and parents across the game in acquiring new knowledge as and when.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And I know that we spoke a little bit a couple weeks ago when you were on the podcast. Yeah. So we were on the podcast. We had, or Jack and John had Paul on the Cornfed Coaching podcast. And so if you want to listen to that, give it a listen to a bit more on the organization side and talking about game models and stuff like that. So some good stuff there. Obviously, for further insight, as you mentioned, Paul, we do have some panelists with us today. So back on the panel is Susan Barr. Sue is going to be one of the presenters at the convention, the virtual convention for United Soccer coming up next week. So that'd be exciting to get a watch or listen to that. And then also a special honor today. It's the second time on the show, first time as a panelist. We got Vince Ganzberg from United Soccer Coaches. Welcome.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
How are things going for you guys on the soccer front? Are we excited about the upcoming convention, working on some training and stuff? Sue, I don't know if your season's up and going or not.
Yeah, so we just got back. I'm outside Philadelphia. So we were in a shutdown for a couple of weeks, but the governor released that. So we just got back into training on the fields, and there'll be limited competition, but the players are all masked, but they're getting used to it, and we're just happy to be going again.
Yeah. And Vince, what's the landscape over by you?
Yeah, here in Indiana, the Midwest. Our clubs are going full bore. And we do. There are some limitations. There are protocols and stuff, but we are training. And I was actually an assistant coach this past fall for a high school program, and we had a limited schedule, but we played and it was great. But yeah, not everyone, I realize, is in the same boat, and all states are different right now, and all areas are, even counties in each state's different right now for a lot of people. So, but yeah, so far so good. Just getting ready for the convention next week and continuing with our blended courses that we're delivering for United Soccer Coaches. So just been really busy with those.
Awesome. Yeah, I've heard some stuff about those things, some good things. So that's great that you guys are doing that. So as always, let's take a minute. This is episode 10. So we're going to look at someone, an impactful or favorite player that wore the number 10 jersey. So it could be someone who played the 10, but when we get to the 12th episode, we will no longer have that ability. So we're gonna have to start getting on numbers soon. So I will take the first AB here, and I could say Vince. I could say Diego Maradona. I could, but that would be a sentimental pick and not truly from the heart. So instead, I'm going to go with a player who spent his entire career playing in Italy, which is a theme for me. Played for giants in Italy, Juventus, Inter Milan, AC Milan, Fiorentina. He was capped by the national team 56 times, scored 27 goals, 5 of which in the 94 World Cup, which was when I fell in love with the game. And that is the divine ponytail. Roberto Baggio would be my favorite number 10.
Cool. Nice.
So that's me. Who's up next? We'll give Paul a little bit extra time.
Go ahead, Susan. Ladies first.
All right. So I think every time we do this, I always say that I'm not going to pick the quintessential female player, but I'm just going with it. So I'm going with Kim Little. I don't know if you guys have seen her play, but she's a Scottish player, a number 10. Plays, I don't know if she's with Seattle Reign now and on loan to Arsenal. But she's about as exciting as they come. She can score. She's clever. She can defend. She can hold off her marker. She can cross. She can play deeper. She's just clinical, technical, really fun to watch.
Awesome. Mm-hmm. We're hitting that YouTube later on.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Vince, you're up.
I'll go. So, I mean, I could go with Maradona. God rest his soul. Platini was in the 82 and 86 World Cups when the World Cup actually was really getting shown here in the States on TV. ESPN carried the 82 and 86 World Cups. And I got really excited when I saw Platini, but I just have to go with, in my opinion, is still the GOAT, and that's Pele. And, anybody that can stop a war, cause a ceasefire, because he's so good and they want to see him play, that's pretty darn good. And I could go with Marta on the women's side. So I'm going to go with the Brazilians.
Did anybody have Platini cleats? Anybody remember those?
No, I had Baggio cleats.
Were those Patrick Platinis?
Yes.
Or no?
Patrick, there you go.
Yes, they were. I did. Yes. Yeah. We are dating ourselves, Susan, a little bit.
We are. They didn't fit, but they looked great. Yeah.
I went out and got the Baggio cleats for the 94 World Cup, the Diadoras. They had the little Italian flag, his little signature on there. They made a
good boom back then. Yes, they did.
Yeah, man. They were quality back in the day. All right, big man. Paul, you're up.
Yeah, I think obviously Diego Maradona is the quintessential number 10. If you think of the number 10, it is Diego Maradona. However, I would select another player who is probably in the same upper echelon as Maradona. For me, there are very few players who are of that level, and Zinedine Zidane is definitely of that level. Wore the number 10 for France, obviously wore the number 5 for Real Madrid, but played as a 10, played as an 8. Zidane, in my opinion, is probably technically one of the best players I've ever seen in my lifetime. Second up, you could have Dennis Bergkamp, who is of the similar ilk as well. So 2 very technically based players. I'd just edge it with Zidane just because of what he won on a world stage with France as well. So my pick would be Zinedine Zidane. He had everything. Technique, physicality, game IQ. And he's not bad as a manager and a coach either, is he? So he's got the.
Done all right.
It makes me laugh because the world football is going mad about Bielsa, and then I look at Zidane and I looked at his honours list and I'm like, wow, it's at open age level you got to put wins on the board and trophies on the table, and he's done it both as a player and a coach. So I think we need to appreciate Zinedine Zidane a bit more than we probably do in world football, in my opinion.
We appreciate him too. I think definitely the headbutt helped us out. So
yeah, I don't know if it helped or hurt. I think it helped.
It made life easier. So yeah. So Paul, great time for you to jump in. I'm pretty sure the screen share is open for everybody. So if you want to get in, I know you've got a really high level presentation planned out for us here today. So
yeah, no problem.
So if you want to jump into it, that'd be great.
Yeah, I look forward to the comments and questions from all of you guys as well. So hopefully
I'm ready to take notes.
So is that is that sharing okay, guys? I'll present it fully as well, so
yeah,
you can see that okay. So just before I start, obviously Damien reached out to me and invited me on the show and asked me, you know, to put together a topic and a session plan. It'd have been very easy for me to pick one of my go-to sessions. Every coach has a go-to session, right? It's one what's in your top pocket, what you pull out at any time. I've actually not done that. I've challenged myself as well. And the reason I've challenged myself is because I've picked a transition topic, and I'm still on the fence in terms of transitional topics, whether as a coach, we should be delivering transitional topics in isolation because there's such a small part of the game. And I'll come on to this as well. However, it must be covered, of course. So I picked a transitional topic, a transition to attack topic to present, and I'm looking forward to some feedback from Vince and Susan and yourself, Damien. And I have delivered this session before. I actually delivered it a few years ago on my UEFA A license. I was given a transition to attack topic and scenario, and I received some fantastic feedback from the PFA coach educator called Andy Barr, former Premier League player as well. And it was a defining moment for me on that program. And it was a defining moment for me as a coach because of some of the things he said to me. So I'm going to share some of that with you as well. So I'm going to move on. So the training objective, it might look like a bit of a novel, but trying to be very, very clear in terms of what we're trying to work on. So my training objective for this session would be to improve the movement of the 9, 7 and 11 ahead of the ball to exploit the opponent during positive transition by playing forwards quickly with vertical movements and runs that create opportunities to advance towards the opponent's goal at speed when the opposition lose possession and are disorganized in our defensive half of the field. So it's quite a mouthful there, but I think it's very clear in terms of what we're looking to work on and improve. Any questions on that so far, guys? You okay with that? Brilliant.
Yeah.
So the starting point for me and the starting point for any coach, in my opinion, should be, okay, so we've identified a topic area to work on. Where does it fit within your style of play and your preferred strategies? Because if we're just teaching and coaching topics for the sake of teaching and coaching them, then where is the reference to your style of play? So I'm not going to read my style of play out verbatim, but as you can see, I've defined what I would like my teams and players to be able to do in all 4 phases of the game. And I've highlighted in green the positive transition. So I've already stated in writing to my players and to our club, during positive transition, players will be encouraged to exploit the opponent when disorganized by playing forwards quickly with vertical movements and runs that create opportunities to advance towards the opponent's goal at speed, creating goal scoring opportunities. So I've already aligned myself in terms of a clear style of play and strategy. So now, how do I bring that to life on the field? And that's the challenge now that we've got. So using the US Soccer Federation's 5 Ws, which I believe are a great tool. Before I was on the US Soccer Federation courses, I used to follow a similar process in my head, but it was never documented. So for those coaches who haven't seen the 5 Ws, I would definitely recommend looking into them. So the 5 Ws have helped me now define what the soccer problem is and hopefully what desired behavior I want in terms of solving this soccer problem. So I would start with the why. So you've probably identified it within a game. So I want to encourage my players to play forwards quickly, obviously vertical movements and runs, create opportunities to score when the opposition are disorganized. So this may be, I've seen it in a game, there's space to exploit and we haven't done so, or we've exploited it a couple of times, but not effectively. So the why then influences the what, where, who, and when, in my opinion. So with the why, we've then got the what. So this is my topic area of improving movement of 7, 9, and 11, as I've said. The where, so because we're working on a transitional moment, I've defined that looking at regains in the defensive half of the field to then advance into the attacking third during a counter-attack. Who are my primary players? My primary players are my 7, 9, and 11. My primary players could be my 6, 8, and 10 if I was looking at distribution to create these opportunities, but I'm looking at the movement ahead of the ball. And then the secondary players are obviously my 6, 8 and 10. And the tertiary players are in my back line, my full backs or my centre back. So that's the who. And the when is the moment of the game. So during positive transition, when we just regain the ball, we're in a defensive shape. The opposition are in an attacking shape. Can we exploit it? Can we move forwards? So clearly defining what the soccer problem is and what the desired behaviour is. So I'm going to go through each one, but just for the audience and just for Vince and Susan, how I worked this one out. I always start with the game and work backwards. So I don't create a warm up first, and I don't create a technical exercise or exercise 1 first. What I do in my coaching practices is I start with the game and break it down. So this was actually exercise 2, which is the phase of play, is the first exercise I created, and then I worked backwards from there. So we've got the game, got exercise 2, exercise 1, and then into the warm up. But I'm going to start in a logical order just for you guys. So as you can see, with the warm up, the objective obviously is to technically, tactically and physically and mentally prepare my players for the upcoming session, which we've defined. So what I would do in this situation, coaching counter-attacking in effect, is I would have 2 small-sided games going. So 18 players, my goalkeepers would play as outfield players to get them touches on the ball. And I'd have a 5v5 and a 4v4 game going there, roughly 40 by 30. And I'd set the challenge as obviously both teams look to score in their goal. But if all players can be in the attacking half when a goal is scored, it equals 2 goals. So what, as well as physically getting a workout in, what it would start to encourage and create is space in behind to attack. So for example, if the blue team have possession of the ball, regain possession of the ball, play forwards and score, it's 1 goal. But if all of the blue players can quickly advance into the attacking half and score, then it's worth 2 goals. What does that do? It then creates space for the red team, if they regain and prevent scoring, to then attack that space in behind. This is the key issue, which I'll keep coming to, is setting the scene and managing your teams and players to create that opportunity and that repetition to counter-attack in the space behind. If you don't set that tone, you're going to struggle to coach a transitional topic, in my opinion. So in terms of the guided questions, so I wouldn't be giving clear answers. I'd be looking at the players to experience and solve this. How can we transition quickly from a defensive to an offensive shape? Where could we position ourselves off the ball to create options in behind, to receive in the attacking half? And what movements ahead of the ball may disrupt their defensive transition, create opportunities to receive the ball? I've got the answers listed there, obviously creating that length, width and depth quickly. Players on the half turn in advanced positions so they can play forwards quickly. The word quickly keeps coming up. And then vertical and diagonal movements and runs to receive the ball in behind. Within this as well, obviously there's there's timings there. 6 bouts of 75 seconds with a minute active rest. So just taking on board the physical periodization. And then within these active rests would be working through a number of dynamic stretches. So that's how I would introduce this transition to attack topic. So happy to open it up to any questions there from Vince, Susan, or yourself, Damien.
Yeah, why don't we start with Susan? What do you think about starting off with 4v4 for this activity or 5v5? Maybe some pros and cons for you on that.
Hey, I was thrilled to see that your warm up was just game based and related. I don't even know how to go backwards anymore to start without some kind of opposition in the game. So that was great. I guess one question I would ask you is that a lot of the session is about getting those runs in behind. So with that, you've added in an incentive to get an extra point. If we can get everybody in the attacking half. Could we also, or maybe even create like scoring zones at the end so that we can get some of those runs that are truly coming in behind a defender, and then where we're sort of sliding those vertical balls, through a little bit. And I just want to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there'd be no problem in putting a condition or a zone in where, you know, in order to score, you must be in the advanced third of this field or whatever to really encourage those forward vertical runs. I think the problem what needs addressing first is creating that space in behind to run in. That's why that condition, it's actually in a weird way that the advancing everyone forwards for 2 goals is not to benefit the team in possession. It's to benefit the other team who can then regain and attack. It's set in a condition, but I'd have no problem in putting scoring zones in as well, Susan. I think that would work. I think, you know, giving players clear areas to advance into, and then obviously we're still playing offsides in here as well. So this is going to affect the timing of runs and you know, how you run, because if you don't have offside in here, then you're just going to have people hanging back and waiting for the ball to pop out. So it's important that you get that condition in as well. But yeah, I think that'd work. It may be a progression. It may be, if you're delivering the same topic later in the week, you tweak your conditions of your games as well. So yeah, I'd definitely be open to that.
Vince?
Paul, I mean, like Susan, it's great to see you presenting a whole session that starts with a game. You know, there's great research out there now, and there's one that's been done recently by a guy named Shane Pill, and talks about teaching game sense in soccer, and basically stated it's basically exactly what you just talked about, right? Just getting them in a game and getting their minds warmed up and everything else like that, and getting them prepared. I loved how you didn't say you have to be in the attacking half in order for the goal to count, right? So now it's a bonus for them, and that was fantastic. So it's very much in line with you know, this game sense in soccer approach, and also constraints led a little bit with that. A question for you, you know, we talk about the tactics and you know, the one of the questions I always get, and Susan probably gets as a grassroots instructor's license when we teach those, is, well, if we start with the game, when do we teach technique, or when is technique brought in? And I'm looking at, for example, the diagram that's on the right, and you got that ball that's slotted through, right? It split those 2 red players, and the player run a fantastic picture. And so I'm thinking, well, if you're a coach and you really want to bring out the application of technique, then, well, maybe we can talk about driven balls, right? Or maybe it's a ball that is bent right into space, or we can use external focus of attention. You know, for example, when you want to teach bending the ball, hey, when we bend it, let's try and get the ball to spin sideways, right? So that's external focus, so they can actually see that. So would you incorporate that in there, or not?
Yeah.
Or would it be based on what you see?
Do you know what, Vince? It's a great question, and I sort of dodged a bullet by picking a transitional topic in terms of the technical question. Do you know why? Because I think teaching transitional moments to players is for advanced players. Now, someone may disagree and say, well, we should teach all players all aspects of the game. 100% agree. However, transitional moments is in split seconds in terms of the game. You're going to have a technical competency to be able to get your head up and recognize these moments in the game. For me, if there's a lower level of technical competency, I really wouldn't be focusing my whole session on transitional moments. I just wouldn't. However, is that to say we then neglect the technical side because these players are deemed more advanced? Absolutely not. I think it actually spins the other way, because the higher the level of the player, the more detail you can get into with those players in terms of the technical nuances. And you give some great examples there, putting, you know, that ball there, with the timing of the running, it's playing in front of him. I would be challenging an advanced player. Can you put a bit of backspin on that ball so it sits up and they can take it in the stride? I'm not going to demonstrate that. I was a centre back, so I'm not going to show them. They're going to have to do it. But that's the sort of challenges that I'd be looking for with my players on a technical front. Go on, then put a bit of backspin on that, or can you put an angle or a curve or a bit of a whip on it so they can just take it in the stride? Because I keep coming back to the same word, and people don't think it's a football word, but it definitely is. Quickly. So how am I playing to the back foot or you know, in front of my teammate? Again, even the littlest detail there, if that run on the right hand side is played to that player's right foot as opposed to the left foot, that slows the moment down, because then they've got to take an extra touch to get it out of the feet and in the half turn and face the goal. I always say to my players, difference between a good player and a great player. A good player will pass the ball to their teammate. A great player will pass the ball to their teammate on the correct foot in the correct space at the correct time.
Yeah, that allows them to play.
That's technique. That's technique and insight, by the way. It's combined. So absolutely, I think the higher the level of player, the more technical detail you can get into. So am I going to coach it in isolation? No, that's for the players to go away and work on it, or me to work on it in another time. But the challenge technically can still be there, 100%.
Yeah, I totally agree with everything you just said. Yeah, there, you know, and the thing about external focus of attention is that if you put that idea in their minds, even an advanced player, they can go home and they can work, okay, how can I make that ball spin sideways, right? So they do that, they go practice that on their own. So brilliant. And I love, again, I'm a fan like Susan, right? I'm a fan of let's get to the chase, right? Let's get to the game and let's get these players going. So thank you.
Yeah, and Paul mentioned that, like, we have to have fun. Like it's in your session. You said let's not forget that, and that's what they want.
Yes.
Yep.
It's their game.
Absolutely. And I think Vince's comment around, I'm glad you said it, Vince, but your comment around, you know, me not saying you must, I really try and stay away from you must, you should, you have to, because what you do by, there's a time and a place, right? There's a time and a place, say, right, 2 touch only. There's a time and a place for all that. In the basis of game-based practices, there isn't, because by putting that condition on a player, you then influence their thought processes and decision-making capability. So if I say you must receive the ball in the attacking half, well, that might not always be the case. You may have a player who regains possession and can beat 3 players on a dribble and advance into the attacking half and finish. Why am I going to stop that in a game? I'm not.
Right.
So you've got to create those. For me, the best words to use with your players is recognize the opportunity to, and then reward it. So if we can recognize the opportunity to get everyone into the attacking half and score, you get 2 goals. Doesn't mean you have to.
Yeah,
no, that's naturally fantastic. Gravitate to that. So.
Yeah, that's fantastic, Damien. I don't want to dominate or Susan.
No. You guys
along that line. So I used to play this game, and I tried, you know, that right. You must or whatever. I'm like, no, that's stupid. So then what I did is I said, all right, everyone started at 5 goals. So if you score, then you take away a goal from the other team. So what it started to do indirectly was when the team lost the ball, they were humping back, right? So it sped up the play actually even more. So I kind of took it backwards, like you talk about, right? Start with the end in mind. So yeah, I love that you said, don't should your kids, don't must your kids, right? Your players, just figure out a way to make it real, which you did, and make it game, make it fun. Great.
That's a good one.
So, Paul, how do you counterbalance the potential of we're encouraging all 4 players to get into the attacking half to leave the space in behind? Do you find, and maybe it's part of the reason why you would say you would only do this with a higher level team, could part of the reason be with a lower level team that an activity like this could almost be ingraining a poor habit of being too high and not defending the space in behind?
I would say so, but I'd also say with a less able team that the transitional moments may be more frequent because a team cannot maintain possession or cannot establish a defensive shape. The problem with that is if transitional moments keep occurring too quickly, you never get the true moment of the game, which is we're in a defensive shape, they're in an attacking shape. Both teams are established in what we're trying to do in that moment. Now we've won it. If it's constantly back and forth, you're never getting that. You're just getting a fast-paced back and forth game like a game of ping pong. That isn't football or soccer at the highest level or at advanced levels. So I think it's more to do with that. However, is it a problem to set a less able players advance forwards? No, because we're not saying everyone go towards the goal. You've got to make a decision now. Some players will do that and then they'll leave massive gaps. Or you'll say, well, in a game, would everyone go towards the goal? No. Okay, well, someone's going to have to make a decision to stay back on the halfway line. Is that a reference point in the game? Yeah, that's where the offside line is in the game at 11v11 and 9v9. So we're actually staying true to the game because What you want to teach the players is, as the ball goes forward, we all go forward as a unit and a team. When the ball comes back, we all come back as a unit and as a team. And then position requirements will dictate what area of the field you're responsible for. So I think it works both ways, in my opinion.
Okay. No, that's good stuff.
Mhm.
So then what is your, so you go through this and you're looking at, so we're at 7 minutes, 30 seconds, you're at 13 total. Do you do any coaching in here? Is it within the flow, or are you using your breaks?
Yeah, so the coaching is the observation. People think observing and watching isn't coaching. It truly is. It's probably the most important part. So yes, I am coaching. I'm always coaching because I'm watching and observing, and I try not to miss anything. So my coaching is my observation, and within the breaks is where I would ask these questions. And another thing, players in this country are very good at giving answers verbally. I don't accept answers verbally unless we're doing a conclusion. I said, don't tell me, show me. And when they show me, I come back and say, right, tell me what you experienced. Don't tell me the answer to the question. Tell me what you experienced. Tell me what worked. So if you think about the learning cycle, it's based on experiential learning now, because the players in this country are very, very smart. They'll pick up on the answers. Yeah, we should press here. Yeah, we should advance. Yeah, we should play vertically. Showing us in the game's a different matter. It's a game what's played on the field, not on a PowerPoint like I'm doing. So I've got to see them do it, and they've got to experience it and quantify it themselves. So I would use the breaks and the stretching to ask the questions or highlight a good piece of play myself and say, this is exactly what we're looking for. Such and such a player did this. Such and such a player did that. Again, that doesn't work as well with the babies and the younger players because they live in the moment. They can't remember what went on 60 seconds ago. With the older players, which is what we're focusing on here, 11v11, I wouldn't coach transitional moments before 11v11. Players can recall. So you can say, remember that experience, boom, 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 and you can set it up within your coaching. So my coaching is observing, asking questions in the break. I want my players playing. Simple as that in this initial piece.
Cool. And then you answered my next question on what would be an age group that you would run this session. So you're saying 11v11 is when you would start. I
wouldn't coach this below 11v11. And again, I'd need to make sure the players, and this is my point about transition, which I was going to come to later on, but you've teed it up. In order to coach transitional moments, you're actually coaching 3 phases of the game. This is why it's difficult, because you've got to coach the phase before. So if you're working on transition to attack, you've actually got to coach your players defensively first, because if they're not in a true defensive shape, when they transition, it's not real. So you've got to coach defensive shape. You've got to coach the transition because that's your topic. And at some point, they may end up in an attacking shape. So you're going to have to coach that as well. This is why transitional moments are difficult or harder to coach than just an attacking topic, a defensive topic. Is that to say you don't coach the other phases when you're working on those topics? Yes, you do, but you have to get the before and after correct when coaching transitional moments. Otherwise, what you're coaching is make-believe. It's not based on realism and it's not based on the game. So you do advanced licenses, you'll fail for that. It's called manipulating the session.
So Paul, with that, then what you really need from this is you really need to coach. You really need to coach the Reds on their. You need to get them disorganized. So specifically, you're trying to incent them to attack,
Absolutely,
and be sort of naturally
be in an attacking shape. Yeah. And hence the condition of get everyone over the line equals 2 goals. I want the Reds. Well, I want both teams to experience it in the warm-up, but ultimately, for like you said, we're working with Blues. I want the Reds in an attacking shape, a true attacking shape, so that they can lose the ball and we can coach the Blues in terms of exploiting that. So, yeah, absolutely.
All right. So let's go to your exercise 1 then.
Yeah. So exercise. Oh, sorry. Went straight to exercise 2. Let me go back. If I can. So exercise 1 And again, I'm expecting quite a few comments on this and questions. Exercise 1 is actually not one of my exercises. I actually, as we said, the best coaches are the best thieves sometimes. I took this one off the coaching manual from a coach called Alan Irvine. Alan Irvine actually is the assistant manager to David Moyes at West Ham United, and he delivered this session for the coaching manual through the League Managers Association. I thought it was a fantastic session or a fantastic activity, and it fitted really well with the topic. But what it also did, even though every player in blue is going to experience it, it allowed me to focus on what the 7, 9 and 11, what it feels like to be those players. I think sometimes, I mean, I was a centre back, so when I trained, if you give me any opportunity in training to go and advance forward and score goals, I was over the moon. Yeah, I'm in this session, get me in, because I'd never be that far up in a game. I'd get a nosebleed if I was past the halfway line. So it's I think it's fun as well. You know, Susan mentioned it. You got to make it fun as well. So within this activity, we're working box to box. We're working box to box, and the blues on the bottom are working as a 3. Now, they're going to work with the most advanced blue against the 2 most advanced reds. So these 3 in front are discounted, they work the other way. So what happens is the 2 blues beside the goal play into the furthest blue and then advance forward to create a 3v2. So now the detail becomes on what are the movements of the 9, what are the movements of the 11 and 7 to support. Technically, can the 9 hold it up, spin it off, play the right pass at the right time? And if the 2 reds win the ball, they can play the pass forwards to their other 2 red teammates to score in the opposite goal. So it's a wave practice going back and forward. Is it very game-based, game-specific? I think this is more position-specific. This is where I'd really be focusing on my 7, 9 and 11 and the detail here. And it's not a bad thing to have all your players experience this. Like I said, it's fun, but they can also experience the physical demands. Because if my centre-back or my 6 regains possession, knowing what sort of runs my 7, 9 and 11 will perform will help me make an effective decision. So it's fun. We're losing slight bit of game-based element, but that's going to come anyway. We started with a game. And exercise 2 is going to be very, very game-based, and exercise, obviously we've finished with a game. So setups there, 4 bouts of 3 minutes with a 1.5 minute rest again, so physically periodized, so we're not killing players because this is very physically demanding. We can rotate the 2 reds, the red defenders, we can rotate the 9, or we can be very position specific where we have our centre backs in as reds or a centre back and full back in as a reds, and work from there. So key coaching points: attacking overloads, use the advantage, use the 3v2, movement to support. So what sort of movements are we looking for? Attackers support around the ball and away from the ball, depending on how the striker receives. Timing and distances of passes as well, because obviously we're playing offsides there as well. So slightly different, but I thought positionally, when I saw the practice from Alan, it was fantastic. I saw it in person, and the level of detail he gave through, and the players loved it. So I thought that is a practice I would definitely use when coaching transition to attack.
Okay. I like the attacking overload. You know, the key point there, trying to get from a 3v2 into a 2v1, but a 2v1 obviously being a much more dangerous, you know, situation as a lack of cover for that one defender. So I think that's a good point. I think a lot of times players hear overload and they think, well, 3v2 is good enough, and it's, well, can we use overlaps and stuff to make that 3v2 a 2v1 would be much better.
Yeah, can we isolate defenders? Simple as that.
Is there any thought just within a progression of this? The one thing that I could see potentially going in, and it's obviously something you'd have to work within your group of 3 attackers, but if we're playing the initial ball into the 9 and we're trying to stress vertical runs, and we get to the point where we've now maybe overshot our runs and now there's no support underneath, obviously we can coach that out of them. Could you potentially even add that other blue player in underneath to be a supporting player, turning it into a 4v2, or what would you do? What do you think is better?
Yeah, you could do. However, what I would say, if that happens in a game and the ball ends up going backwards into that that blue underneath the ball and the two attackers have gone on, I would argue at that moment in the game, you're now not transitioning to attack. You're now in attack, because that's probably going to take 4, 5, 6 seconds. Within that time frame, at a good level, the opposition are going to be back in and start to get organised defensively. Is it a problem to coach that? Absolutely not. But then if the players keep doing that, you're actually losing focus on your transition to attack. So the success barometer is, well, if I have to go backwards, it means the timing and distances of our runs, our passes haven't been right to exploit the opposition being out of balance and disorganised, because that is still the focus. That is a natural progression, yes. And do the players need to be aware of that? Yes. But I would still focus on that transitional moment. And you know what? If your timing's off and your runs are off, well, you've missed the moment. You'll get another go in a minute. So
your bigger coaching point would be the angle of the pass in and the movement of the 9 away from the defender, so that we could look to play forward instead of being under pressure and playing backwards.
Yeah, I think the key coaching point is the 9. The 9 is the start here. Whether you play with a target player or not, the 9 within my system of play stays advanced. And if the 9's already locked on recovering, the 7 or the 11 must stay advanced and take up the role of the 9. So you're always going to have a target player. That target player is going to be crucial in terms of that transitional moment, whether they receive or not. But now, by receiving, you're forcing the 2 oncoming attackers, which in effect take the place of your 11 and 7, to really think about their runs and do it quickly. So that's the focus for me.
So, Sue, what do we think about this activity? I think
I love it. I mean, I've done something else, but I different. I like this. I like this this twist, this change on it, because one thing, you're going to get a lot of scoring. So this is fun. So I always go back to the fun. You're definitely going to get a lot of scoring. Your goalies are going to get repetitions. So it's really great. 2 quick questions. Was back where Adrian started, or Damien, sorry, Adrian's not with us this week, where Damien started with, is really your first is the attacking overload. So maybe you want to talk for a second about, you said about how do we isolate the defender? Because this is really about trying to force the opposition to make decisions, right? If they just hunker down, 2 center backs are hunkered down centrally, you know, they're gonna deny a lot of opportunities. So how do we displace them? And then the other thing is, I'm assuming that if the defense wins it, maybe we get a point by playing it into the other half to their teammates in the other half.
Yeah, if the defense win it, they play to the other 2 reds, and it becomes a 2v1 going the other way to a finish.
Oh,
so
okay.
You got transitional moments both ways.
Right.
So you're actually coaching transitions both ways. And you're right, Susan. You always need a target and a focus for the opposition team, the team you're not coaching, because otherwise, if you asked me to be the red, I'd do it to my fullest ability. But if I just regained the ball and then everything broke down, I'd be getting very bored with that very quickly as a player. So we've got to put ourselves in the mindset of the players. Okay, what do I do now? Where's my reward? I've just won it.
Yeah.
So what I'd do in a game is pass forward quickly and go down the other end of the field, which fits in with the topic. To answer your question on isolating the defender, this is why it does become an advanced session, is because you're working on the 3rd player. You're working on the 3rd man or the 3rd player or the 3rd woman, whatever you want to call it. And it's the player away from the ball. The player away from the ball needs to make the correct movement to really drag the covering defender and put them in 2 minds of, well, if I go and support my teammate, then the ball's going to get switched and I'm out the game anyway. So what you want to do is really unbalance the covering defender. And that's down to the movement of the player away from the ball. So that has to be a focus. So decide who that player is going to be. Really, the number 9 is going to decide on how they move and how they receive. So, and they can be crossover runs or overlaps, underlaps, whatever you want. But it's a key coaching point, Susan, about what you mentioned there.
So the cover defender, okay. Not too much the pressure defender.
No, pressure defender is going to get overloaded no matter what, because we're going to go at him or her, and it's going to be a 2v1. Okay. I want to take the covering defender out of the equation, drag them away. And that's because my 3rd runner is in a good position to receive and not close enough where the covering defender can do both. Pressuring defenders are going to have a nightmare here if we do it right, because whatever they do, they can't win. If they go to the ball, it's getting popped off. If they edge the bets, the player on the ball's driving and finishing. So
Love it.
that's what I'll be looking for.
Vince, what do you got? I know you were trying to jump in before, so.
Oh, no, it's fine. First off, the activity is fantastic. And I one thing that I really like that's struck me is you're giving length. So you're giving space, because I see a lot of coaches try this activity or try something like this activity, but there's no space to go, right? So therefore there's no transition. So first off, that's fantastic. Would you ever work on, so we can be very functional here, right? You've mentioned the 9 and we can talk about the 9.
Yeah.
Would you ever work on how the 9, I think Bielsa, you mentioned Bielsa earlier, calls it unmarking, right? So in other words, how can the 9 get free, really, in another way? Would you ever work on that? Or would you focus primarily on, like you talked about, the third player running, getting support, going quickly?
Yeah, I think, I've read Bielsa's works about the 5 different movements to lose your marker, which is a novel in itself. It's very interesting.
It is. Yes.
But yeah, you absolutely. In an ideal world, if your 9 can get free and into space and receive in this situation, then it's winner all the ways round. If he doesn't or she doesn't even need the 7 and 11. However, due to the setup of this, that's going to be very difficult. I think. I think it'd be a second phase within this, or it'd be a progression where the ball comes in from a different way. But do we have to coach what you just mentioned, Vince? Absolutely, because like we said, if that 9 can get free straight away. We talked about best number 10s around. I always think of the best number 9 who I've seen. Obviously, you've got Ronaldo 9R9, but Batistuta would be the best number 9 you'd ever drop into that session. He'd probably bully the pair of the Reds and put it in the top corner. So that's, and you talk about unmarking and movement as well as obviously technical prowess, power, ability. That's the sort of player. So yeah, you if they can do that, fantastic. So it may be a different start point. It may be the Blues bring it in as opposed to playing into the 9s, and that would alleviate that problem. So
no, it's fantastic. Yeah, you're right. That whole thing is a weekend read if you can figure it all out. I mean, it's pretty in depth, but it's and I appreciate the way you said. To me, it's a secondary component, right, of it. And it is. And let's, even though this is for advanced players, but let's say that they're struggling. Any tweaks you would make or modifications you would make?
Yeah, I think it becomes the easiest one is becoming a 1v1 between the 9 and the defender, isn't it? And then just recognizing when to pass, when to turn, when to dribble as a 9. Free space. I think you get a lot of success very quickly while doing that. Another comment may be, well, how often do we have attacking overloads? But normally in a game, it's attacking underloads. However, if you relate it back to the topic, I would expect overloads because that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to exploit that space, and we've got to do it. I keep saying it quickly. If you're doing a transition, quickly. That's your favorite word as a coach. So it's, can we get there? Can we really exploit it? And some we've seen. I mean, I can't think of examples off the top of my head. But sometimes that 11 and 7 make that run so quick that the red becomes unbalanced and moves out of the way, and the 9 just drives to goal anyway. So it's about supporting the attack. And if you think of the best teams in the world over the last few years, when they win the ball and when they lose the ball, they're always in very good positions in that transitional moment. So by pushing your 7 and 11 on, that's okay, because if you lose the ball, then you'll hopefully have 3 players who can get in and around the ball quickly to keep it up there. So it filters in. You've got to keep, this is my point, you've got to keep connecting all the phases of the game. You can't just coach one phase in isolation. You've got to think what's next.
Perfect. No, I asked that question because, we get, Susan, I'm sure, deals with it a lot. We work with a lot of coaches who say or think they might have advanced players, but they might not, so how do you tweak it? Right. And so they go on the coaching manual and they see how it's done perfectly. Right. And then it's like, Oh, my kids can't do it that way. So I just wanted to ask that. That's all. I think that was fantastic. Yeah, make it a 1v1 and then add layers in as you go. So
Well,
perfect.
just, along those lines real quick is that, when we talk about advanced teams and, we almost have to define that a little bit. Like I've got a really good U15 team and I know where we're going to break down. I know exactly what we're going to break down, but you mentioned that we're getting a lot of functional work out of the 9, right? And so you can kind of, you can get a lot out of that where we actually have to create some counter movements for that 9, right? If you want it here, you're going to have to take your defender away where you don't want to. So you're getting hold up play out of that. I think that one of the things when we say play quickly with teams that aren't quite as advanced, they might be good, but maybe not really advanced, is that the problem is the execution, right? Because they have the idea, they can see it, but when you get them playing so fast, it's that executing of that, like that ball into the 9, that's got to be really driven, right? And so, and that's, you really got to hit that accuracy. You have to have that great vision. And maybe with a team that isn't quite as strong, you can break down right away with that.
Yeah, and I think going back to, if you go back to the old sessions and go back to Wayne Harrison being on, someone playing quickly is going to be up here as well. And I think when you get to middle to lower level teams, the speed of thought is not going to be, where it needs to probably do some of this stuff as well, which is another thing, when we're talking about executing the game in a quick manner, it is technical, but it's also mental as well.
I'd almost say it's not about the level here. I think it's more on the development journey of where your players are at. It's almost not advanced play. Yes, it does help if the players are advanced. I wouldn't coach this to U13s. And there's a very clear reason I wouldn't, because it's the first year in 11v11. They've got enough to think about without a 5-second moment within the game. But by the time, if you've got a really good team, then by the time they get to back end of U13 and into U14, you may be looking at teaching this. You may have a team what is not as advanced, but at some point they're going to have to know how to counter-attack. They're going to have to be taught how to counter-attack and have the opportunity to experience it. So all I'm saying there is it may come later in their development, maybe at U15, U16, and this is where your periodization plans come into effect. Knowing what are your priorities at what age groups and what levels, and just because typically it's done by age group, but if you've got an advanced group, you can accelerate your periodization plan and go into more advanced topics. If they're not as advanced, you can regress it slightly, because you've always got to meet the needs of the players, not the needs of your fancy periodization plan. It comes down to players ultimately. But if you've got a plan and you know where the priorities fit, then you can judge accordingly. So I think Susan and Damien make some very relevant points there. And to Susan's point, they might not be advanced, but are they going to get loads from this? Yeah, absolutely. They're going to get loads.
So Paul, going back to your initial and your 5 Ws, and you're talking about the who. So obviously we've gotten a good amount of work with the 9, 7, 11 within this activity. Potentially within the transition, if the red team were to win, you could say you're using 6, 8, 10 a little bit. When do you start to work in your third layer, or 2s, 3s, 4s within here? Because I feel like there's the 2s and 3 relationship with 7, 11 is going to be pretty important.
Yeah. As I said, in this moment, I think they're a tertiary group, but at some point you're going to touch on them. And the answer to the question comes in how much contact time do you have with your players? So Susan, do you work with your players every day? I believe pretty much every day. You could probably get it done in the working week. Your priority with your first couple of sessions would be your 7, 9 and 11. Then you'd set up a similar topic or similar theme and work on the distribution from the 6, 8 and 10 to hit those movements. And then later on in the week, before you do your game prep, you may include the movement of the fullbacks to also support underlaps, overlaps, advance, and your 4s, 5s. And remember, the goalkeeper can do this transition, because if the red team get a shot off, keeper catches the ball, and all of a sudden that red team don't get into a defensive shape quickly and there's space in behind. I know it's not always sexy to play long, but you know what? If you can do it under control, it's the most effective way. Can your keeper hit the 7, 9 and 11 or the space in front of them? And we're not saying a kick. There's a difference between a kick and a pass. I want them to pass it to the 7, 9, and 11 into the space in front. So that has to be factored in at some point. The problem is I can't do it all in one session. So it's layering it. It's layering it, absolutely. So yes, at some point, whether it's in the same working week or the next time you visit this topic, the focus of your players is going to change.
Okay.
Awesome.
So I think we'll pop on to exercise 2.
Yeah. So moving on to exercise 2, and this is the one I started with from the game. This is the one that I created. So what we've got here, and my biggest challenge, so we've got 18 players, so it becomes a 9v9. My biggest challenge was really getting the spacing right. I know Vince alluded to having the length. It was getting the spacing right. And honestly, I spent 30 minutes thinking about, do I have the blue team able to attack the full half? But then how does it affect the red team and the defensive piece? Or do I bring one of the goals onto the edge of the attacking third for the blue team to attack, so the reds have the full half? I really wrestled with it, I'll be absolutely honest with you. And I just went, you know what, 9v9, I'm going to go box to box. We're going to lose some reference points from the penalty boxes and whatnot. But what we're going to have is realistic spacing for that number of players. So I wrestled with that for quite a long time in my planning process. So I'm sorry if that was going to be a question, but that was my first thought of how do I structure this? Because it's somewhat easier if you know you're focusing in the attacking third, because you'll probably use a half or 3/4, or if your topic focus is in the defensive third, you know you're going to have to put the defensive third in and probably a halfway point. When you're going from one area of the field to the other, you've got to realistically work out what numbers have I got, what spacing is realistic, and how do I map this out. So I went full width, which I think is important, and I went full width for a reason. There's a back four in of the Reds. They would be expected to defend the full width for the field. And then I went box to box, just to take, just to take that 36 yards off the field, and not be as much of a physical drain for 9 players versus 9 on a full field. So again, structure for the blue team, playing in a 2-3-3 formation with a goalkeeper. So I've removed my left back and my right back. I could have partitioned the pitch in as well because those fullbacks aren't in there. But I actually wanted to force my 11 and 7 to come back if the fullbacks advance, because then they've got to learn how to go from that deep position to an advanced position. And then the red team are in a 4-3-1. So it matches up in terms of two Blues defenders against 1 attacker. There's a back 4 for our front 3 to exploit. And then the challenge, and this is probably my biggest learning from the UEFA A license I did a number of years ago, was putting this, not condition, but like Vince said, a challenge. Challenge the red team to advance into the opposition half and score within 6 passes. And if they do, they get 2 goals instead of 1. Because when I initially did this on the UEFA A license a few years ago, I didn't put that challenge in. And guess what the red team started to do? Because the blue team was sat in deep, they started to keep possession. Killed my session because I couldn't coach counter-attacking because the red team weren't taking risks. They were happy to have the ball. And fair play to Andy Barr, he absolutely dragged me over the coals on it to say, you need a condition in there, because you're never going to get your topic out to coach. So it was a poignant moment in my own coaching career, and that's why you go on those advanced courses. So that challenge is absolutely fundamental, because you lay that challenge down to the Reds, they're going to try and score in 6 passes. What happens? They advance forwards, they take risks, they go forward. Guess what happens when you take risks? You lose possession at some point. Then it gives us the opportunity for Blues to counter. So number of intervals here and how I would deliver it. I'd do 3 bouts of 6 minutes, depending on the fitness of my players, with a 2-minute rest. The first interval, I wouldn't actively coach. It'd be observations and getting the Reds right. So Susan mentioned it earlier about making sure the Reds are right in terms of attacking correctly in this situation, so we can get that moment to transition. So it'd be organising the shape, making sure they know what to do, making sure they're defending real, attacking real for the Reds. And then in the first break, I would then look to my Blues to really start to coach them. If the Reds within 2 or 3 minutes are playing realistically, then I may step in earlier and coach. It doesn't have to be regimented on the time, but I'm going to allow the first interval almost, if it needs it, to get the red team right. Because to my earlier point, if I don't get the red team right, forget me coaching the Blues. It's going to be unrealistic. So you've got to spend the time working on the opposition, not coaching the opposition and managing the opposition. Once that's right and the problem is surfacing, I can coach the blue team. And then in the break, some questions which are specific to units and positions. And then in the second, third and fourth intervals, if we're going there, look at movements off the ball, talk about vertical separation if you want, getting the defenders to step out so we can advance behind, moving them side to side. So the 11 and 7, do you always want straight runs? I use an example from Manchester United back in the early 90s, and it was actually from a set piece. And I think you had Mark Hughes and Kanchelskis or Giggs, one of them. I can't remember who it was, but on a corner, when they were defending a corner, they would stand literally in the wide positions on the halfway line. And what had happened when the ball was regained, they would cross over and sprint, and United knew that was going to happen. So guess what? They could hit big diags, bang, bang. And the opposition defence were like, what is happening here? And it was so effective so many times. So it's that similar sort of horizontal movement, separation, allows you to stay on side, but really unbalances the opposition team. So that may be another movement which I stole from Sir Alex Ferguson's team a number of years ago. Timing is everything. Timing of your movements. Stay on side, move as the ball travels, meet to move the ball. You can talk about the 9 playing on the blind side of centre-backs, so on and so forth. And the quality of the final ball. So to your point, Damien, at some point, you're probably going to have to work with a 6, 8 and 10 on their decision-making. Is it a diagonal pass? Is it a clip into space? Is it a 1-2? Because we can counter-attack through quick combinations. And then it comes back to Vince's point about coaching technique, because the technique has to be locked in as well with the detail. So there's a number of different ways to counter-attack. The key is counter-attack quickly, exploit the space before they can get into shape. So I think, looking at it, it looks like a game. It is a game in effect. There's a condition on there, and he's trying to recreate that scenario. You could even use a scenario. You could say to the Reds, listen, you're 2-0 down with 15 minutes to go in a cup semi-final. What are you going to do about it? Reds come flying out trying to score. Blue team, let's put this game to bed. Bang, bang, bang. So however you want to do it, you can recreate that scenario, but you must condition the Reds to want to be in that mindset of attacking. Otherwise, if they were happy to keep the ball, you're never going to get your topic out.
Yeah, no, I agree with the condition thing is always good to do. And then, yeah, I mean, getting the opposition right is important. And I think just for coaches that are watching, and especially coaches who maybe don't have a luxury or time to go for licensing and education on a regular basis, what I asked you about the 2 and the 3, getting into this, that's something that I've really been a big takeaway from me doing my B license right now of, not trying to get and cram everything into one session, so be it, yeah, they might be a focus, that might be a focus for later on within your periodization. And so it was interesting to hear you kind of echo the same thing that I'm hearing, there, because it reinforces that. And I think it's good. And the big takeaway there was be general within your topics, don't take on too much, and so I think it's really good. But I think there would be some coaches that might look and sit there and say, it's, even in this activity, there's no 7-11, there's no 2 and 3, but that's obviously designed for a reason. And that's the important part about session development, is there has to be a reason for everything that you do. Otherwise, we're missing something. Vince and Susan, any feedback on this activity as the finisher?
Go ahead, Susan. Go ahead.
Yeah. So Paul, I'm just gonna throw a couple things and just see what you just a real quick one. In your phase of play, are you going to, because you can still control some of this, it's not completely game like, are you going to give the ball predominantly to the red team in order to create that transitional moment to begin with?
Yeah, that's a really good question in terms of where do you start here. It's a really good question. I think there's going to be potential opportunities where I do restart with the Reds in possession, because I'm going to want to get to this point quickly to turn it back over. And if the Blues are really strong against your Reds and the Reds never get the ball, that's another problem you've got, because you can never coach your topic if your Reds are already if your Blues are already in possession. So it's a really good point. You've got to make sure the teams are balanced here, because if your Blues are your strongest 11 or your strongest 9 there, the Reds may never get the ball to attack. So you can never coach transition to attack.
So it's really about observation. I mean, you observe to see, okay, if we're not getting that moment in the game.
Yeah.
And then the other thing, Paul.
Sorry, Susan. I've just got another answer to your question. Typically, what I try and do is not have structured starts, and there's a very clear reason I don't have structured starts. I always have a couple in my top pocket for what you just said, but I try not to have them because I want them to occur in a natural flow of the game. And if it occurs in the natural flow of the game, it means that players are probably in realistic positions. Is there going to be a time where I want it to start from a certain point? Yes, absolutely. But I use them very sparingly in my own coaching. It depends on how much time you got with your players again, how much you need to work on them and how quickly. If this is, game day -1, game day -2, you might have to have those structured starts in quickly, because we ain't got time for the players to take this on board and it to come out. We need to know this, because we know the opposition like to come at us high and we'll leave space in behind. If it's part of a wider development, then let it occur in the games, let it occur in the activities, and then it's natural. Everything you're coaching is game realistic because they're playing the game. So again, depends on your time frame, your programming, what you're trying to do. So again, I didn't even think about that until you mentioned it. So thanks for the question.
Vince would have, if he was my instructor, he would have picked up on that. So, yeah. And you're so right. It's like having a session on building out of the back, and the only thing you do is do goal kicks. Well, that's not the game. The other thing I wanted to ask you about was, is if you coach these ages, particularly like 15, 16, 17, is your forwards, they start to run out of ideas, right? And we start to get so many of these just straight runs going forward. So, you talked about, unbalancing. I'd almost like to think of a way, because I know that's happening to my teams. Like we're really great at getting the ball into the final third, and then we just run out of ideas. So is there, would you ever reward, like, I almost feel like if we can quickly win the ball, if our midfielders can win the ball and we can get it to our 7, right? Can we start to create some of those interchanging runs that you were just talking about, off of a Man-U corner kick? But I think that's kind of the next level, is to get your players to get out of this idea, well, I'm an 11, so I'm going to stay on the left side of the field. And then, how do we get a 10 a little bit more involved in this too?
Yeah, very relevant questions. And I think creativity is key. We can't tell players what to do and expect it to be creative, because that's going against creativity. However, we've got to give tips and guidance. And it comes back to, just because you're playing as the 11, I don't care if you pop up at the right back post and put it in the back of the net, because if it's relevant and if you see something what you think may work for us in that moment, then go with your gut, go with your instinct of making that run. So absolutely agree. It doesn't have to be regimented here where the 11 stays on the left or the 7 stays on the right. I would say I try and coach that to be more in the defensive aspect of the game in terms of responsibility. When we haven't got the ball, it is your responsibility, really, first and foremost, to defend that area of the field. That is your position. If you're not there, someone else will cover for you until you can get there. In attack, it becomes more fluid, it becomes more creative. And you're right, Susan, you want those different runs, you want the vertical runs. For me here, if your 9's really intelligent, the 9 is going to move 360 degrees. The 9 is going to peel right to allow the 7 to invert, peel left to allow the 11 to invert. They're going to advance forwards, or they're even going to drop in, bring one of the centre backs with them, and then the 10 has to see that, and the 10 makes the run. So there's so many things happening that you could do a season just on this session, I think, because it's got everything, you know. And then we've not even talked about the 2 and the 3. You know, if you've got absolute flyers as fullbacks and they play more as wing backs, how can the 2 and 3 get involved here? You look at Manchester City when they attack on the counter, 11 and 7 come inside, De Bruyne dropping in, the fullbacks are gone, the fullbacks are going. So it depends on your player personnel, but you want to encourage everything. And again, quickly, forwards if you can. The best front 3 to reference right now for me, pains me to say it, it'd be Liverpool. Look at Liverpool's front 3 on the counter. You look at last season, absolutely devastating on the counter attack. You watch them in the Champions League last year, it was unbelievable. So I'd be sending through those videos off YouTube and whatever straight to my players. Watch Mane, Sané, Firmino. Watch what they do. Watch how they. But then you've got Trent Alexander-Arnold bombing on as well. So there's so much going on. But that's the model for this sort of moment of the game within my team. That's not to say every team wants to play that way. That's how I've defined our style of play. So you're right. There's a lot going on and a lot to coach there. You got to bring all the players in. Can't just be about the 7, 9, and 11.
It's I don't know if Damien wants me to continue on asking a question, but I'm not really going to ask a question. Just a couple of things, just for maybe the coaches that are listening in. So I love how you got the interval and then you got the break with the questions all written out. And I think a lot of times as coaches, we forget to ask those questions during the break. And so a good friend of mine, you know, told me that just write how and when, right? Or something on your hand and just constantly look at, or just write a question mark on your hand before training. And that way you remember to ask these questions, because development, as you well know, and you're talking about it, the vast majority of development occurs in training or in practice, not during competition. It happens here. So a couple things on those breaks. Would you consider, again, the same friend of mine who's a doctor, his name is Dr. Fritz Edel from Butler University, and he's in the movement education department. And he talks about getting the athletes to do the work. And one way to do that is by putting them in breaks, putting them in groups or teams, giving them a question, having them come back, and then, like you said, all right, go play and let me observe and see, maybe I can figure out what you all discussed. So would you consider something like that? Or maybe something, because you mentioned observation. Sometimes I call that parenting, when we're just watching our kids actually do something in the kitchen, and we're just observing how they're going to do it and not yelling at them, and being thankful that they're doing something. So we're observing. But would you consider something like that? Because I love how you mentioned you would observe a lot. And, you're not the sage on the stage, you're more the guide on the side, and you're facilitating it. But also there's, the old John Wooden quote, don't confuse activity for achievement. So you still have to get in there and you have to give them some feedback. But would you ever consider that type of methodology or pedagogy for your coaching?
Yes, and I do use it to answer your question.
No.
Just to clarify a couple of things. I think you're right on the observation. Your observation, I should probably say, it needs to be purposeful observation. Mm-hmm. The observation is not being done just to make sure no one breaks a leg or something. The observation is being done to process information and process feedback of what's next.
Yeah, and get that.
I don't want to be the coach who look at me. However, to your point about the John Wooden quote, don't confuse activity with achievement. Your first port of call is your standards. So I delivered at the convention last year, and I had a group, and it was a talented group, and I was delivering, but you could see they were nervous and they weren't giving everything. And I didn't know the group, and I pulled them all in, and I reminded them, listen, this isn't the standard. I know you guys can play better than this. So please play real. Please lift the standard And that was my first coaching point of, don't worry about the crowd, play the game. And all of a sudden they looked at me, I said, listen, don't worry about everyone on the side, you're the ones playing. And the standard went up. Then I can coach. Then you can observe real, then you can coach real. So that's to your point about activity. Don't confuse it with achievement. Never, ever let your standards slip. I will never let the standards on the field slip.
Yeah.
Again, if you're giving 100% and you can't do it, I've got to help you fix that. If you're not giving 100%, that's an unwritten rule. Then you're getting dragged over the coals off me if you're not giving everything. Second point is, yes, I want to let them play and I want them to come up with the decisions, but it comes back to my point of, what do I know about the group and the individuals already in terms of what they know and what they can achieve? Because if I know they can do something already and we've worked on movement of the front three or whatever, and they're not now doing it, guess what? I'm not going to make it all rosy and start asking 100 questions. I'm going to tell, because they know already. So I'm not going to waste my time in painting this canvas. I'm going to say, listen, you know how to do this. You know how to do this. Show me. Start doing what you know how to do. If it's new to them or if they've not grasped the concept completely, then I think the ownership has to be with the individuals and the group. And it has to come back to that experience again. If I keep telling them, then I'm not always going to be there to tell them. So I have to be able to create that experiential learning for the players. I actually love creating those opportunities for group work, unit work, teamwork, and allowing them to solve the problems. And 9 times out of 10, the players will solve the problems themselves. We as coaches have got to facilitate that. It's like, if you've ever dropped a tactics board in front of a group of U10 players, it's hilarious because they're straight in and they're straight engaged. And if you ask them the right questions, they love it. If you ask a U17, U18, okay, what are we doing well? Mm-hmm. Most of them can tell you, what do we need to be better at? That's my halftime team talk. I'll come to it towards the end. So yes, in terms of pedagogy, or if you're working with adults, the andragogy, yes, you've got to have all those layers, and you've got to know where your players are at, and you've got to know what they can already do, and then tailor your approach. Again, if you're game day -2, I may not have time, Vince, to set that up. Right. It may be more of a autocratic style. So there's a lot of factors to consider. In pure development, the approach you described is the approach I adopt. When it's pure development, that is what I use.
Yeah, I think there are times to push and there are times to pull, and but you just have to find the moment, and to whatever U.S. soccer is known for, it depends, right? Because everything for them it depends, and they're right. It depends on a lot of things, and so no, I just the whole session, and I apologize. Damien, I sent you a text. I do have to get off here in a little bit, but no, the whole practice has contextual interference, which is the way that players are going to develop, especially at the advanced level, and what you're talking about. So, no, I don't have anything else to add of Susan or Damien, but no, I appreciate just the whole, you mentioned the game model too, right? So you can throw out some ideas based on our game model that we have, right? Hey, when we win the ball, we're fast and furious, right? We're fast and furious. We're going, or whatever phrase you come up with, or whatever, terminology you come up with, but or language your team speaks.
Yeah, I think on the back of that comment, Vince, and I'm not going to go through it because obviously we've taken up a lot of time, but there are potential solutions that I'd be looking for. But to your point, it has to fit with your game plan. Yeah. The reason we train and coach in training is for the game. So where does it link to my game plan objectives? It's in my in possession transition to attack. It's one of my 3 objectives for the next game. Then I can assess it. Then I can see if we're doing it in a game. I can check for understanding.
Yeah, perfect.
How does it link to the systems of play? Well, we play a 4-3-3. In attack, it looks like that. In defense, it looks like that. It fits. How do we go from the right-hand side to the left-hand side at speed is what we're working on. Tactics, individual units. What am I looking for you to do in possession and out of possession? prepare the team before the game, remind them, ask the questions based on what you've worked on in the week. How do you think we can exploit the opponent during positive transition? The key for me is always a runner threatening in behind. That would be the game focus. Always a runner threatening in behind. And then you can link it into your halftime team talk. Allow players, give players time to reload and potentially begin to discuss the first half, player ownership. So I know it's quite heavy, that document, and that's one training session, but I think my point is being, sorry, I'll just come out of that. My point is being, it's not just planning a training session.
Right.
It's connecting it to the game, and it's connecting it to wider development, and it's connecting it to everything we always do. If you ask me to create a training session plan, I can do that off the top of my head, but how am I going to benefit the players? So I think as coaches, we don't do that enough. I don't do it enough, probably.
You're right. Yeah, you're right. And how you developed everything, right? Even going to the game and the halftime talk, it's just brilliant and fantastic. So yeah, thank you. And I apologize. I do have to get off here in a little bit, but
no, Vince, I appreciate you coming. I know you guys are busy this week, so get ready for next week. So
I'm just going to do this though. So we mentioned the 10s, and so maybe when we get to number 19, my favorite player is my granddaughter. So maybe you can invite me on when we do the 19.
I'll make a note of that right now.
And I will say, yes, Leighton is my favorite number 19. So there you go. But thank you so much. I'm so sorry. I have to get going, but Paul, thank you. It was great.
No, thanks for the feedback, Vince. Appreciate it.
Oh, I didn't give you any feedback. It was great. So
Vince, we appreciate it. Don't be sorry. The soccer world is depending on you guys next week. So
no.
we need something to do. So
all right. Well, thanks, Susan. It's always nice seeing you. And Damien, thank you.
Take care.
Thanks.
Yeah, you bet, Vince. Thanks.
Hey, I have to give a shameful plug to Paul because I just met Paul today, but Paul, I am like a proud card-carrying member of the coaching manual for many, many years. I think I got in pretty early. So anyway, it's awesome website, very, very user-friendly, and there's a lot of really great content. The videos, excellent. They're short, they're to the point, really sharp coaches you have there. So awesome. Thanks.
Thank you, Susan. Appreciate those comments. Thank you.
Yeah. And Paul, just to say, I'll talk with you about this entire presentation and see if we could put this out as linked up.
I've got no problem sharing this presentation. I will share it through you, Damien, and you can send it out. Whoever wants a copy of the whole thing, I've got no problem. Like I said, Susan referred to it. The middle, the wave practice delivered by Alan Irvine is unbelievable. We've only just put it on the site in the last 3 weeks. Alan's massive experience. He's currently coaching in the Premier League, of course. So it's not just the what, it's the how, I think, is the absolute crucial part if you watch his experiences. So, and final thing from us, as the coaching manual, we never want to tell people what to do, ever. We're just trying to provide resources to support. I've done it myself. I've stolen an activity off there and then tweaked it to my own delivery. So, and that's what it's about for us.
This entire packet, and I know that obviously this is something that you put together. You use the coaching manual for the graphics and for the sessions. Getting into the session. So you just talked about, doing a session is one thing. You said you could do a session off the top of your head, then following up with game plans and objectives, systems of play for within that game, your tactics, preparing your team. Are those tools that coaches can help implement within their teams with your program, the coaching manual?
Yeah. So they can plan all of that. Obviously, we're not going to do it for them. They have to come up with their own systems of play and their own tactics. We're actually going to be running an online course in the coming weeks and months around creating game models, creating systems of play, strategies, tactics, and of course, how to then implement and create a periodization plan. So myself, along with Martin Hunter, who is a former technical director at Southampton, UEFA Pro license instructor, we're going to be running those courses in the coming weeks to support coaches, and Lee Fletcher as well, who are obviously based in Madrid, who works with a coaching manual. So we're just trying to continue to, similar to yourself, Damien, and Susan and Vince, at USC, we're just trying to help people. It's It's just about giving people the tools. We want people to go away and think, and I don't want anyone to cut and paste my style of play because it might not fit with yours. If it does, take it if you want. How you execute it's going to be different from me. But, you know, find your own way. Have your own opinions in this game. I think we've all got opinions. You go back to the UK and sit in the pub when it's open, everyone's got an opinion. So let's express those opinions. Tell me the why. I've got no problem in anyone disagreeing with me on anything football related. You're going to have to tell me your why, and then I'll choose to agree with you and say, I didn't even think of that. Or I'll say, that's fine. That's your opinion. This is my why. Let's agree to disagree. And we move on, because that's the beauty of the game. If everyone played the same way and thought the same, it gets very, very boring and stale. So,
no, it's been good. And just for anyone that's out there, whether we're listening or watching, because we are going to try to put this out in podcast form and see how that goes. But you know, the coaching manual is a powerful tool. As you know, Sue said, she's been using it. I use it for my session development, and I'm looking forward to you know, the future courses that you guys have coming up. So
sure.
Especially the one on developing a game model and that type of stuff. So it's a really great resource. It's not, you know, expensive by any stretch of the imagination. And so I would highly, highly, highly suggest. It's not the reason that we've had Paul on. We're not pushing a product. We're basically just telling you it's very, very good. And so
No,
if you have time to get on it,
we didn't pay you to say that. Thank you.
No, you have not. So
genuine soccer people involved within our organisation, from pro players to past players to guys who are currently working in top academies in Europe right now. So it's all relevant. It's all relevant is what we try to be. So
it's quality stuff. Paul, you're a quality guy. I appreciate getting to know you. Hopefully we'll get to see you sometime in person when we're done with all the stuff we're going through right now. So
hope so. Yep.
Sue, same from you. I feel like I've been on many a call with you and never actually met you. So
I know, my corn-fed friend.
Yeah. So this is good. For all of us here at Corn-Fed Coaching FC, I'm going to sign off. Thanks to Paul. Thanks to Sue. Thanks to Vince. Thanks you all for watching. We'll get this stuff out to you. And have a great week next week at the virtual convention for United Soccer.
Thank you, guys. Damien, Susan,